It was the first day of the new semester, and in Mr. Thompson's classroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The fluorescent lights buzzed above the rows of desks, and a lone voice broke the silence. "Do you even know what 47 times 9 is, David?" Mr. Thompson sneered, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the boy sitting in the second row. The boy, Alex Davis, glanced up from his notebook. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. His classmates watched in uneasy silence. Everyone knew the deal. Mr. Thompson always seemed to target the black students. He didn't care about their answers. He only cared about putting them in their place. But today was different. Alex wasn't the same shy, quiet kid he used to be. Without hesitation, he answered, 423. Mr. Thompson's face twitched, clearly surprised. The class froze, unsure of how to react. A soft gasp rippled through the room, but no one dared speak. Alex had just solved a problem that most people would struggle with in their heads. Yet Mr. Thompson had mocked him, not realizing the genius sitting before him. Why had Mr. Thompson targeted him? And why was Alex so confident now? Little did the teacher know, Alex wasn't just any student. He wasn't the troublemaker, the at-risk kid they assumed he was. He was a math prodigy, and soon everyone would know it. But how long could he keep this hidden from the teacher who saw him as nothing more than an easy target? This wasn't just about a math problem anymore. It was personal. Alex was determined to prove something, not just to Mr. Thompson, but to everyone who had ever doubted him. Alex had never been a stranger to whispers. He had grown up in a world where his intelligence was often dismissed because of his skin color. He had always been the quiet one, the kid who loved math but stayed in the background, too afraid to step out and show what he was really capable of. At home, his mom would always tell him, "You are more than what they see, Alex. Don't let them define you." But how could he, when he was just a 15-year-old kid trapped in a world that wasn't ready to see him for who he truly was? Today, though, was different. Something had shifted inside Alex when Mr. Thompson mocked him in front of the class. It was as if a switch had flipped. No more hiding. He was going to prove them all wrong, especially Mr. Thompson. Alex's eyes burned with determination as he scribbled formulas in the margins of his notebook. His mind was working faster than anyone could follow. But this wasn't just about math anymore. It was about taking back control. The turning point came when Mr. Thompson, irritated by Alex's easy response to his question, turned to the class with a challenge. "All right, I'll make this more interesting. Someone solved this problem on the board, and I'll give them extra credit." He didn't think anyone would actually step up, but Alex's hand shot up. The teacher hesitated for a moment, but when he saw Alex's hand, he laughed. "Oh, this should be good. All right, Davis, come up here and solve it if you can." The room fell silent as Alex approached the whiteboard. The problem was a complex algebraic equation with variables and fractions, something that made most students groan in despair. But Alex didn't flinch. His fingers moved swiftly across the board, writing each step with the ease of someone who had been doing math his whole life. He finished in less than 3 minutes. Mr. Thompson stood there dumbfounded. No one had ever solved a problem like that in front of him, not in that way, and certainly not by Alex. The class was stunned. For the first time, Alex's classmates were forced to see him for who he truly was. As the days passed, Alex began to notice something strange. Mr. Thompson's mocking tone turned into skepticism. The teacher started watching him more closely, as if trying to catch him making a mistake. The teacher couldn't accept that the quiet, awkward black kid was a math genius, but Alex's confidence only grew. Every time Mr. Thompson tested him, Alex answered with ease. Soon, rumors began to spread through the school. People whispered in the halls about the kid who could solve problems faster than anyone else. Some admired him, while others resented him. But Alex didn't care. He was no longer hiding in the shadows. He had come out into the light. His classmates began to respect him, and even the other teachers started to take notice of his abilities. But not Mr. Thompson. The teacher grew more frustrated as he watched Alex excel in every class. Every problem he gave him, Alex solved with ease. One afternoon, as Alex was walking out of class, Mr. Thompson pulled him aside. "Why didn't you tell me?" the teacher asked, his voice tight, almost offended. "Tell you what?" Alex asked, confused. "That you're gifted." Mr. Thompson muttered, his pride wounded. Why didn't you speak up earlier? Alex's eyes narrowed. Maybe I was waiting for you to notice, he said calmly, but with a quiet fire in his voice. It was a moment of realization for both of them. Mr. Thompson had finally acknowledged Alex's brilliance, but it was too late. Alex had already taken control of his destiny. No longer would he be the target of ridicule. He had proven to everyone, not just Mr. Thompson, what he was capable of. But just as Alex thought he had won, the world presented him with a new challenge. His final exam in Mr. Thompson's class. It wasn't going to be easy. He was still a black kid in a system designed to fail him. Despite everything he had proven, Alex was haunted by the fear that Mr. Thompson might find a way to sabotage his chances, whether through bias or hidden prejudice. The night before the exam, Alex barely slept. His mind raced with questions and doubts. What if everything he had worked for was a lie? What if he couldn't rise above their expectations? Despite everything, the day of the exam arrived. Alex walked into the classroom with unshakable resolve. He was ready. Mr. Thompson watched as Alex breezed through the problems, finishing long before the bell rang. The teacher stood at the front, watching him with a mixture of awe and begrudging respect. There was no denying it now. Alex was brilliant. Mr. Thompson had no choice but to admit it. The bell rang, signaling the end of the exam. Mr. Thompson handed back the results to each student. When Alex received his paper, he saw the highest grade in the class. Not just any grade, the highest possible score. Mr. Thompson couldn't hide it anymore. "You did well, Davis," he said, a hint of genuine admiration in his voice. Alex's smile was small but powerful. It spoke volumes. Years later, Alex stood at the podium of a prestigious university, addressing a sea of eager students. He had gone on to become a celebrated mathematician, working on groundbreaking research that changed the way people thought about math and logic. But the most rewarding achievement wasn't the degrees or accolades. It was the moment he had stood up to Mr. Thompson, the moment he had proven his worth. Alex had faced prejudice, doubt, and relentless bullying, but he had never let it stop him. He had risen above it all, not just for himself, but for every student who had ever been told they weren't enough. As the audience hung on his every word, Alex paused for a moment, looking out into the crowd of young faces, eager to hear his story. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but strong. "I was once that kid," he began, "the one they didn't think would make it, the one they called less than. But I'm here to tell you, I'm more than they ever imagined. And you are too." The room fell silent. In that moment, every person in the audience felt a sense of something bigger, something beyond just the story of one young boy overcoming the odds. Alex scanned the room, locking eyes with students who had been told they weren't enough, the ones who had been overlooked, underestimated. He spoke with fire in his heart. "So let me ask you this," Alex continued. "What do you think you're capable of if you stop letting others define you? What dreams have you kept hidden because someone once told you that you couldn't achieve them? Do you believe in your worth when the world doesn't?" His words hung in the air, inviting everyone to pause, reflect, and ask themselves, what could happen if we all stepped out of the shadows, no longer afraid to show who we really are? Then Alex asked them, "If you've ever been underestimated or doubted, how did you overcome it? What pushed you to rise above the people who didn't believe in you? Share your story below. Let's remind each other that we are more than anyone's expectations of us." Alex stepped back from the podium, waiting for the answers to flood in. As Alex stepped away from the podium, a wave of silence filled the room. The audience was deep in thought, processing his words, reflecting on their own lives. Then slowly, hands began to rise. The first student to speak was a young woman named Mia. "I was always told I wasn't good enough," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "They told me I'd never get into a good college because of where I came from. But I didn't listen. I worked harder, and now I'm here, about to graduate with honors." The room erupted in applause, but Alex stood quietly, taking in the moment. He knew that his journey had been just one part of a larger story, one that involved all of them, together. Another student, a tall young man named Jason, stood up next. "I used to think that because I was quiet and introverted, I wouldn't fit in. They told me that people like me don't succeed. But I didn't let that stop me. I've been working on my own startup, and it's doing better than I ever thought it would. Applause followed once again. The stories kept coming, each one more inspiring than the last. Alex felt his heart swell with pride, knowing that his message was having the impact he had hoped for. As the session came to an end, Alex looked out over the room one last time. He had shared his story, but more importantly, he had inspired others to share theirs. Remember, Alex said as the students began to file out of the auditorium, you are more than the limits others place on you. You have the power to define who you are. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As the last student left the room, Alex stayed behind for a few moments, reflecting on everything that had brought him here. From the quiet, unsure boy in Mr. Thompson's class to the man standing before these students, he had come a long way. He had faced the challenges, the prejudice, and the doubts, but he had never given up. And now, as he walked out of the auditorium, Alex knew that his story was just beginning. The world was waiting for what he would do next.